Very, very low rents. The average rent was about $9 a foot. But the multifamily caps are still relatively low. I wouldn't, but those are for buildings that have a fairly high percentage of rent-regulated units. If the building was completely free market today, the cap rate would be in excess of 7 for sure. And looking at retail, to give you some perspective, we could have sold just about any retail condominium anywhere in the city at a 5 or a 5.5 cap 2 years ago. Today, it's tough to find somebody to buy a retail condo at a 7 cap, maybe if the rent was well below market. And really, the key metric in looking at retail today is how does that rent compare with what you think the market is? Nobody really knows what the market is because from our perspective, but anything that happened before September 15th is irrelevant. We're looking at everything that happened after September 15th. It's a different world. So if you have a retail project where your rent is well below market, that's a much safer bet. I would say that if you were at what you think market is, with a neighborhood type of retailer, cap rates are pushing even into the 8s. And on office, we don't do large institutional office buildings, but small B and C office buildings up to about 100,000 feet. Again, you have to look at the quality of the tenant, how much space is rented, how much is not rented. A lot of times in office today, you're attributing pretty much zero to any vacant space. Which is a very, very different dynamic than, it used to be more vacancy the better because I'm going to, even though the building's averaging $80 a foot, I'm going to get $120 a foot for the vacant space. But I think the cap rates on office are probably pushing into the 7 to 8% range as well. And clearly I would add at least 100 to 125 basis points in the boroughs compared with Manhattan.
Excellent. Another question? What about hotel financing? Anyone? Does anyone here finance hotels?
I do a little bit of hospitality. We've really crammed down the average daily rates on the rooms real hard. The operator's got to be absolutely stellar. He's got to have a decent flag for the reservation system. And for us, it's got to be extraordinarily well located. Otherwise, we won't touch it today.
I'll just comment, new construction for hotels is going to be a really tough road to hoe. I mean, maybe if you have Four Seasons and you're only looking for 50% equity and it's in exactly the right place that's underserved, but it's going to be nearly impossible to finance new construction of a hotel with declining occupancy rates and ADRs all over the country. I think it's still absolutely possible to refinance a hotel at low leverage and just, I don't want to keep preaching about low leverage, but those deals are the ones that are getting done easily. I mentioned earlier an office building in Brooklyn Heights. Well, that was a $9 million loan on roughly $40 million building. So that'll get done by 10 lenders in New York City very efficiently at a very good rate. The quote I got today is a very low leverage loan. It was a $12 million loan on maybe a $150 million asset. So those deals are operating normally in this environment, but when you're trying to push the envelope, it's almost impossible in today's market, and for hotels, even more so.
I agree with what Greg said. We look at hotel deals all the time. It's what the LTV is for us. Also, things have to be in place. We wouldn't look to do new construction on a hotel today, but repositioning is happening all the time. We want to see the flag in place. We want to see all the licenses in place. We had an incident where recently a hotel was being purchased and the borrower forgot to properly apply for his liquor license transfer. So imagine having his transfer over. One day there's a bar and a catering facility there, and the next day you'd have to shut it down. That did not work out so well. So everything has to be put into place and done properly, but we will lend, we'll go to 60, 50, 55, 60, 65% on LTV on a hotel, but it does have to make sense.
Do people talk about cap rates in terms of hotels, or is it different language altogether? Anyone?
I think it's more on the possible rent revenue that you can get out of the rooms and the location. And then that'll translate back to a cap rate. We can do it in a backwards manner rather than pick a number and work from there.
Got it.
From my
How much,
bank,
sorry, let me just restate the question. How much recourse for a hotel that's been stable and operating for at least 10, 15 years?
depending on the leverage involved, if it's got anything more than 50% in my bank, it's got to be signed for.
Again, what I said before, it would be signed with us, but we really would look to move on the guarantee. LTV today controls, guys. Everybody's saying it. We're all different lenders. We're all saying it. The more equity you have, the more flexibility you have, but you're not going to get to the 80, 85, 90% where we were a year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
But I think it's interesting. I'd like to hear from the bankers here. When you look at loan to value on an acquisition, it's very easy. You could look at loan to price. But on an existing refi, how do you determine what value is, particularly for larger properties where there haven't been any trading? What kind of underwriting do you use to feel comfortable that you're at your LTV threshold?
I'll start there. Actually, to your earlier point that most deals are going through with 40% equity, but versus the cap rates you're seeing and some of the cap rates we're using, more often it's 6.5 to 7 than it is going to be 6 or below. So if you do the math there, our 80% LTV might be 60% on the purchase price. And actually, that's a great question. Both Fannie and Freddie have come out. They're looking at multifamily in 3 different categories. There's acquisitions, which go up to 80% on their valuation, refis, which are up to 75%, and then a cash out refi. So if you've got $10 million of leverage and you're taking out $2 million, even if it's going back into the property, that's really classified as a cash out deal, unless you're putting that $2 million into an account to improve the property. And that's going to affect the leverage and debt service coverage. And so that's the rough way to do it. If you can't isolate a value, it's going to be at a slightly lower LTV and higher DSC.
I'll just make one other comment on a hard money loan that our fund did literally on New Year's Eve. It involved a retail condominium on West 13th Street, right down the block near the Gainsbourg Hotel in the Meatpacking District, about a 12,000 square foot space that was being purchased for $18 million. We financed $8.75 million. The borrowers are very, very strong, true real estate people, personally guaranteed the loan, about $70 million net worth, about $25 million of verifiable liquidity, so as we call them, real guys. And they put in $9.25 million plus closing costs. Even there, in this market, we were concerned because we were in at 48% of acquisition cost, and we thought they got a very good deal on the property. But what if we were wrong? What if, rents, and we underwrote it with $150 a square foot rents rather than the $250, which was the verifiable most recent numbers we were able to find. We gave the basement legal selling space no value in our underwriting. And the deal still worked at that low number, 8.75. So really, LTV is almost illusory at a certain point because it depends how hard you hit the numbers, how severe, how cruel, so to speak, your underwriting is. But we figured that even if we were wrong, so maybe we're at 65%, 70%. If the world goes to hell in a handbasket, we're still not going to be at 130% loan to value. If our borrower defaults, the personal guarantee, I agree with John, it's not so much that we care about the money the guy has in the bank, but he's going to focus more on a deal where he has personally guaranteed the loan. His wife is going to make him focus on the deal that he has personally guaranteed over maybe the agency deal where he doesn't have a PG on. So he's going to let that property go before the one that he's personally guaranteed. And if all else fails and 2 years go by and we go through a tough foreclosure, our investors in our fund will now be the proud owners of a very nice 12,000 square foot retail asset in the midst of a market that we hope will then be recovering.
I just wanted to, everyone talks about personal guarantees. I just want to mention something. Personal guarantees